At the ceremony where everyone was applauding the commencement speaker, she froze. So did he. 20 years after leaving her with a pregnancy and a check, he looked at the young woman by her side, and he knew. She was his daughter, and in that instant, the past returned, demanding to be heard. The golden June afternoon stretched over Vanderbilt University like a blanket of fulfilled promises. The dogwood trees bloomed in vibrant white along the neoclassical corridors, while the graduation hall filled with proud families and realized dreams. Emily Smith, 41, nervously adjusted her black dress, the only presentable one she owned, and watched her daughter receive the award for the top student of her graduating class. Sarah Smith, 20 years old, wore her cap and gown with a natural elegance that took Emily's breath away. Her girl, her reason for living, her miracle, born from desperation and raised on cold sandwiches and unconditional love. But amidst the applause that echoed between the limestone columns, an unexpected presence cut through time like a knife through the heart. Mr. Michael Alexander Harrison, 50, a powerful tycoon in the bourbon industry, entered the hall followed by photographers and university officials. The institution's benefactor, the commencement speaker, the symbol of Tennessee success. But when he saw Emily, his world stopped dead. And when his gaze fell upon the young woman receiving her diploma, he nearly collapsed. Those eyes, that shy smile, that chin, lifted with determination. It was like looking in a mirror to the past. Sarah had his face, his gestures, his same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. She was his daughter. He knew it in that instant with the crushing certainty of fate. Emily felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She hadn't seen him since that terrible night, 21 years ago, when she was dismissed from the Harrison family estate with 2 suitcases and a letter of termination that made no mention of her pregnancy. The pain was still alive in her chest, a wound that never healed. For 2 decades, she raised Sarah by doing other people's laundry and selling homemade pies at the farmer's market in Centennial Park. She told her daughter her father had died in an accident. Not for revenge, but for protection. She couldn't let her child know the rejection she had endured. Now, facing Michael Alexander's empty grandeur, everything she had fought to keep buried began to surface like the roots of an ancient oak, and she had to decide, protect the secret once more, or let the truth destroy everything she had built. Emily was a woman of unwavering faith, proud yet humble, with a heart that had learned to love in silence. Her greatest internal conflict was carrying the shame of having loved a man who never loved her back, and yet secretly, still wishing he would recognize his mistake. Her deepest humiliation had occurred exactly 21 years ago, when Michael Alexander, upon learning of her pregnancy, handed her an envelope with cash and said, "Fix this problem however you can, but don't expect anything else from me." Emily had torn up the bills and sworn she would never speak his name again. Michael Alexander, born into an old money family from the Tennessee countryside, had inherited the largest bourbon empire in the state. He grew up amidst privilege and demands, learning that power was measured in acres of corn and that feelings were a weakness. His greatest fear was not being loved for who he truly was, but for what he possessed. So he traded affection for control, closeness for dependency. Upon seeing Emily again and discovering Sarah, his orderly world crumbled like a house of cards in the rain. The next 6 months would weave the destiny of 3 lives through chance encounters, unspoken words, unearthed memories, and tears that would wash away decades-old wounds. The first direct reunion happened a week later, during the state fair in Nashville. Michael Alexander had gone to supervise a promotional event for the family bourbon when he saw Emily selling handmade pottery at a modest booth. He approached with a hesitant step, but she pretended not to recognize him and attended to other customers. He bought a small vase, left an excessive amount of change as a tip, and left without a word. The second encounter was more tense. Michael Alexander drove to the rundown apartment complex where Emily and Sarah lived, in a working-class neighborhood in East Nashville. It was a deteriorating brick building divided into small units around a central courtyard where an old oak tree grew. Emily was hanging laundry when she saw him at the entrance, her eyes filled with tears of rage. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, aware that neighbors were watching from their half-open doors. "I need to talk to you," he replied, taking off his fine felt hat. "We already talked 21 years ago. You were very clear." "Emily, I didn't know that." "That what? That she would be born? That we would survive? That I would raise her alone while you built your empire?" Her words came out like daggers wrapped in sobs. Michael Alexander lowered his gaze for the first time in decades. "I didn't know she was... that you had... Get out!" Emily said and went into her apartment, leaving him standing under the oak tree as the neighbors murmured behind his back. The first small crack in the wall of resentment came when Sarah, unaware of the connection, was selected for a scholarship program sponsored by Michael Alexander's company. The young woman came home excited, showing her mother the official document. "Look, Mum, they gave me a scholarship to study business administration. The sponsor is Mr. Michael Alexander Harrison, the bourbon guy. They say he's very generous with outstanding students." Emily felt her blood run cold, but Sarah continued without noticing her pallor. "I'm going to work part-time at his offices to learn the business. Isn't it wonderful? I'll be able to help you more with the bills." That night, Emily didn't sleep. She stayed by the small shelf she kept in a corner of her room, where she had a simple cross, a candle, and a picture of her late mother. She prayed until dawn, asking for wisdom to face what was coming. Meanwhile, Michael Alexander also spent a sleepless night at his estate in the Tennessee hills, surrounded by fields of corn that stretched to the horizon. He had searched for Emily for years, but never found her. After Sarah's birth, she had disappeared as if the earth had swallowed her. Now he understood why. She had changed her surname from Miller to Smith, her late mother's maiden name. The fourth encounter happened at the corporate offices of Harrison Bourbon, a modern building in Nashville's financial district. Sarah had been working there for 3 weeks when Michael Alexander decided to meet her personally. He summoned her to his executive office, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the entire city stretching toward the hills. "Sit down, Sarah," he said in a soft voice, studying the young woman's every gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Tell me about your family," he asked, pretending to review some documents. "It's just my mom and me, sir. My dad died when I was very little." Michael Alexander felt a pang in his chest. "What's your mother's name?" "Emily Smith. She's a very hard-working woman. She's made a lot of sacrifices for me." "Was Smith your father's last name?" "No, it's my maternal grandmother's name. My mom changed it after she was widowed. She says she wanted a fresh start." Every word was a dagger in Michael Alexander's soul. Emily had erased every last trace of his passage through her life, including his name. "Would you like your mother to come and see the facilities?" he asked suddenly. "Really? She would love that. She's never been in such a fancy place. I'll arrange a special tour for her." That afternoon, Michael Alexander sent one of his trusted employees, Mr. Peterson, to personally invite Emily. The man arrived at the apartment complex in a late-model truck that caused a stir among the neighborhood kids. "Mrs. Smith, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Michael Alexander Harrison. He invites you to tour the facilities where your daughter works." Emily leaned against the doorframe, feeling her legs grow weak. "Tell your boss I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not interested." "Ma'am, with all due respect, your daughter speaks very highly of you. Mr. Harrison wants to meet the families of his scholarship recipients." "My answer is no." Mr. Peterson scratched his head, uncomfortable. "Ma'am, he told me that if you refused, I should tell you these exact words. Emily, please, just once, for her." Hearing her name on the lips of that stranger, Emily knew there was no escape. After 3 sleepless nights, she accepted the invitation. The tour was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Emily put on her best dress, one with small flowers that she had sewn herself, and arrived at the offices with her stomach churning with nerves. Sarah greeted her at the reception, beaming with excitement. "Mom, you're going to love Mr. Harrison. He's so kind to me. He treats me like I'm his own daughter." Emily forced a smile, feeling her heart break in two. The meeting took place in the executive boardroom, with a panoramic view of the city. Michael Alexander was standing by the windows when they entered. He was formally dressed, but Emily noticed the small wrinkles around his eyes, the grey at his temples, the years that had passed for him too. "Mrs. Smith," he said, extending his hand, "it's an honor to meet you." Emily hesitated for a moment but shook his hand briefly. The electricity of the contact made her take a step back. "Mr. Harrison," she replied in a controlled voice, "your daughter is extraordinary, one of the brightest students we've ever had. Sarah has always been that way, very dedicated. You can tell she comes from a good family. Values are inherited." The comment hung in the air like a disguised apology, but Emily didn't respond. For the next hour, Michael Alexander showed them the facilities, the labs where the quality of the bourbon was analyzed, the warehouses where it aged in oak barrels, the cornfields that stretched beyond sight. Sarah asked intelligent questions and took notes in a small notebook. Emily watched in silence, admiring her daughter's passion for learning. At the end of the tour, Michael Alexander accompanied them to the reception. "Sarah, could you give me a moment alone with your mother? I have some scholarship papers I need to review with her." The young woman moved to the waiting area, and Emily was left alone with the man she had loved and hated in equal measure for 21 years. "Emily," he said in a low voice, "we need to talk. I already told you we have nothing to talk about. She has the right to know who her father is. Her father is dead. He died 21 years ago when he decided he wanted nothing to do with us. I was young, Emily. I was a coward. I was scared. I was scared of what? Of love, of being a father, of your family finding out you'd gotten the maid pregnant." The words came out like lashes, and Michael Alexander received them without defending himself. "Scared of not being enough," he finally replied. "Scared of ruining your lives like I had ruined mine. My father had taught me that love was weakness, that responsibility was a burden. I thought it was better to stay away. Well, you achieved your goal. You pushed us so far away that we disappeared completely, and I've regretted it every day of these 21 years. Emily looked him in the eyes for the first time in the conversation. She saw pain there, genuine regret, but she also saw the powerful man who could destroy the peace she had built with so much effort. "What do you want now, Michael Alexander?" "I want to know my daughter. I want to be part of her life. I want to make up for all the lost time." "And me? Where do I fit into those plans?" He remained silent, and in that silence Emily found her answer. "Sarah already has a life planned. She's going to finish her degree, get a good job, start her own family. She doesn't need a stranger to show up and claim rights he never exercised. But you have no right to disrupt her peace because of your guilty conscience. If you really love her, you'll leave her alone." Emily turned to leave, but Michael Alexander stopped her with a question that completely disarmed her. "Did you ever love me, Emily? Even a little?" She stopped without turning, feeling tears threaten to betray her. "I loved you so much, I thought I would die when you threw me out. I loved you so much I kept our secrets as if they were jewels. I loved you so much that I raised our daughter by speaking well of a dead father instead of ill of a cowardly one." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But that love starved to death, Michael Alexander. It froze to death on the nights I spent alone, wondering what I had done wrong. It died of shame every time Sarah asked about her dad, and I had to make up stories." "Emily?" "No, I've said too much. Keep your scholarship. Give my daughter a job if you want. But don't come near me. Don't come near us as a family. We are no longer your responsibility." She walked out of the office with her dignity intact, but her heart shattered once again. In the car, Sarah noticed her silence. "Are you okay, Mom? You look very pale." "I'm just tired, honey. It's a lot to process. Isn't Mr. Harrison so kind? He told me I remind him of someone he knew a long time ago." Emily closed her eyes and leaned her head against the window. Fate had a very cruel sense of humor. That night, in the solitude of her room, Emily pulled a shoebox from under her mattress where she kept her most precious memories. Photos of baby Sarah, her first school projects, but at the very bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a photo she hadn't seen in years. It was of her and Michael Alexander at the county fair 21 years ago. She was 20 and wearing a white cotton dress. He was 29 and wore a western shirt and a hat. They were standing by a food stall, laughing at something she no longer remembered. They looked happy. They looked in love. They looked as if nothing could ever tear them apart. Emily touched the face of her younger self in the photograph and wondered what had become of that woman who believed in fairy tales. Then she looked at Michael Alexander's face in the picture and was surprised at how much he resembled Sarah. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way of tilting his head. For the first time in 21 years, she allowed herself to remember what it had been like to love him. Chapter 2. The following weeks unfolded like a dangerous dance between truth and lies. Sarah flourished in her job at Harrison Bourbon, while Michael Alexander found increasingly elaborate excuses to visit her area and get to know her better. Emily, from a distance, watched with a heart torn between pride in her daughter's achievements and terror that the past would come to light. The first sign that something was brewing came one July afternoon. When Sarah returned home quieter than usual, Emily was preparing a complex 3-layer casserole to sell the next day when she noticed her daughter pacing the small apartment, restless. "What's wrong, honey? You seem very pensive." Sarah sat in the only chair they had, a wooden piece painted blue that Emily had rescued from a flea market. "Mom, do you know Mr. Harrison well?" Emily felt her hands stiffen around the dish she was greasing. "Why do you ask?" "It's just, something's weird. Yesterday he called me into his office and showed me pictures of when he was young. There was one where he was at a town festival, and I swear there was a woman in the background who looked just like you." Emily turned toward the stove so Sarah wouldn't see her expression. "A lot of women look alike, honey, especially in old photos. But it's not just her looks, Mom. It's the way she smiled, the way she stood, even the way she wore her shawl. It was just like you. Did Mr. Harrison say anything about the photo? He asked me about my family again, specifically about my dad. I told him the same thing I always do, that he died when I was little, but I noticed he got very serious and asked if I remembered his name. Emily dropped the knife and turned to her daughter, trying to control the tremor in her voice. Sarah, why would Mr. Harrison be interested in knowing about your family? I don't know, Mom, but lately he asks a lot of questions about you, about where we lived before, about what our life was like when I was a kid, about whether I have more family. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stayed in the apartment complex's courtyard under the oak tree, looking at the stars and feeling that the world she had so carefully built was beginning to teeter. Mrs. Davis, her 80-year-old neighbor, came out to join her. What's troubling you so much, child? Oh, Mrs. Davis, I think the mistakes of the past are catching up to me. Mistakes don't catch up to us, Emily. Secrets do, and only because we're not ready to let them go. What would you do if you had to choose between protecting your daughter or telling her a truth that could break her heart? The old woman rocked in her wicker chair, thinking with the wisdom of someone who had weathered many storms. Look, honey, secrets are like seeds. If you plant them too deep, they never grow. If you leave them on the surface, any wind will blow them away. You have to find just the right depth so they can sprout when the time is right. And how do you know when the time is right? When you can no longer carry the weight alone. The next day, Michael Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He had spent the last few weeks discreetly investigating Emily and Sarah, trying to understand the years he had lost. He hired a private investigator who confirmed what he already knew in his heart. Sarah was his daughter, but there was more information than he expected. Emily had worked 3 jobs simultaneously during the first years of Sarah's life. She had sold homemade pies in the early morning, done laundry in the afternoons, and sewn pieces for a textile mill at night. She had refused help from social programs out of pride, and she had rejected marriage proposals from good men because she couldn't love anyone else. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had sacrificed everything, her youth, her health, her chances to rebuild her life, to raise a daughter he had abandoned. That information devastated him. He locked himself in his private study at the estate, surrounded by portraits of generations of Harrisons who stared down from their gilded frames, and for the first time in his adult life, he wept. He wept for the birthdays of Sarah's he had missed. He wept for the nights Emily had spent alone, worrying about her daughter's future. He wept for the man he had been, selfish, cowardly, more concerned with his reputation than with the consequences of his actions. But most of all, he wept for the lost time he could never get back. That same afternoon, he decided to write a letter, not another one of the formal memos he dictated to his secretary, but a real letter, written in his own hand with all the honesty he had stored away for 21 years. Emily, I know I have no right to write to you after everything that happened, but there are things I need to say that I should have said a long time ago. I've been getting to know Sarah these past weeks, and with each passing day, I realize more what an extraordinary woman she is. She is intelligent, hardworking, honest, compassionate. She has solid values and a generous heart. You taught her all of that. All of that is the product of your love and your sacrifice. I hired an investigator to tell me about the years I missed, and what I discovered destroyed me. I learned about the 3 jobs you held to support her. I learned about the sleepless nights when she was sick and you didn't have money for the doctor. I learned about the times you didn't eat so that she could. I learned about the special Easter dress you sewed from scraps because you couldn't afford a new one. I also learned about the good men who courted you and whom you rejected, men who would have given you the stability I couldn't, who would have been good fathers to Sarah, who would have loved you as you deserved. Emily, I was a coward. I was a rich, spoiled boy who had never had to face the consequences of his actions. When you told me you were pregnant, my first reaction was panic. Not panic for you, but panic for myself, for what my parents would say, for how it would affect my future, for having to give up the freedom I took for granted. I thought that by giving you money, I was solving the problem. I didn't understand that there was no problem to solve, but a life to embrace. I didn't understand that what you needed wasn't money, but love. I didn't understand that what was to be born wasn't a complication, but a miracle. I have lived these 21 years as a man successful in business, but a failure as a human being. I have built an empire, but I never built a family. I have earned respect, but I have never respected myself. I have had everything money can buy, but I have never had the one thing that truly matters, the love of the people I should have cared for most. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing to tell you that I understand the magnitude of what I did, and that I deeply admire the extraordinary woman you are, and the extraordinary mother you have been. If there is anything I can do to compensate for even a small part of the damage I caused, tell me. If there is any way to be useful in Sarah's life without hurting the peace you have built, guide me. If you prefer that I disappear forever, I will. But I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret losing you. Not a night goes by that I don't wonder what our lives would have been like if I had had the courage to stay. With all my respect and my eternal love, Michael Alexander. Michael Alexander sealed the letter in a cotton stationery envelope and sent it to Emily with Mr. Peterson, who had instructions to deliver it personally and wait to see if there was a response. Emily received the letter on a Friday afternoon as she was returning from the market with groceries for the weekend. Sarah was at the university, so she was alone when Mr. Peterson knocked on her door. "Mrs. Smith, Mr. Harrison asked me to deliver this to you personally." Emily took the envelope with trembling hands, immediately recognizing Michael Alexander's handwriting. It was the same elegant script she had seen on the dismissal letter she received 21 years ago. "Is there a reply?" Mr. Peterson asked. "Tell him that I'm going to need time to read this." When Mr. Peterson left, Emily sat on the edge of her bed and opened the envelope. She read the letter 3 times in a row, feeling each word stir wounds she had thought were healed. For the first time in over 2 decades, Michael Alexander acknowledged the magnitude of the damage he had caused. For the first time, he clearly saw the sacrifice she had made. For the first time, he spoke of love instead of obligation or responsibility. But also, for the first time, Emily allowed herself to think about what could have been, about the mornings they would have woken up together watching Sarah grow, about the Christmases they would have spent as a family, about the support she would have had during the difficult nights when Sarah had a high fever at age 2, or when she broke her arm at 7, or when she cried over her first heartbreak at 15. She allowed herself to imagine a life where she wouldn't have had to choose between buying medicine for her daughter or buying food, a life where she could have studied too, where she could have developed her own talents, where she could have been more than just a single mother struggling to survive. But then she remembered Mrs. Davis's words about secrets that sprout in their own time, and she realized there was a truth greater than her own pain. Sarah had the right to know her full story, no matter how much it hurt her. The next day, as they prepared breakfast together, Emily made a decision. "Honey, I need to talk to you about something important." Sarah was whisking eggs to make bacon and eggs, and stopped when she noticed her mother's serious tone. "What is it, Mom? Are you sick?" "No, it's not that. It's about your father." Sarah put the fork down and turned completely toward Emily. "My dad? But my dad died when I was a baby." Emily took a deep breath, feeling that every word she was about to say would change her life forever. "Your father isn't dead, Sarah. He's alive, and you've been getting to know him these past few weeks." The silence that followed was so thick, it seemed to have physical weight. Sarah stood motionless, processing her mother's words, searching her face for any sign that this was a cruel joke. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "Your father is Michael Alexander Harrison." The coffee mug in Sarah's hands crashed to the floor, shattering and spilling hot liquid across the small kitchen space, but neither of them moved to clean up the mess. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "Mr. Harrison how can he be my dad? 21 years ago I worked at his family's estate. I was very young your age. He was young too. He had just come back from college. We fell in love." "You fell in love?" "I fell in love with him, honey. He cared for me, but not the way I cared for him. When I told him I was pregnant, he gave me money and asked me to fix the situation." Sarah leaned against the kitchen sink, feeling her legs grow weak. "He asked me to have an abortion?" Emily nodded, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. "And that's why you left him?" "He left me, honey. He fired me from the estate and told me he wanted nothing to do with us." Tears began to roll down Sarah's cheeks, but her voice came out firm and controlled. "Is that why you told me he was dead? I thought it was better for you to believe that than to know that your own father hadn't wanted you." "But, Mom, how could you not tell me when I met him? How could you let me work for him without knowing who he was? Because I was afraid he would hurt you like he hurt me. I was afraid you would get your hopes up, and then he would reject you again." Sarah stood up straight, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Mom, that wasn't your decision to make. It was mine. I had a right to know the truth so I could decide what to do with it." "I know, honey. I know, and I'm so sorry. But I was so scared." "Does he know I'm his daughter?" "Yes, he realized it on your graduation day. He says he wants to know you, that he wants to be part of your life." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process everything she was hearing. "And what do you want, Mom?" "I want you to be happy, honey. I've always wanted that. If getting to know your father will make you happy, then that's what I want too. But he hurt you so much. That's in the past, Sarah. What matters now is your future. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her mother with an intensity Emily had never seen before. No, Mom. What matters is the truth, and the truth is that you both lied to me. You to protect me, him because I don't know why he lied to me. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to tell him I know who he is, and I'm going to listen to what he has to say. Then I'll decide if I want him to be part of my life or not. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of pride and terror at her daughter's strength. Will you be okay alone while I go? Yes, honey. Go on. After Sarah left, Emily sat in the courtyard under the oak tree and cried all the tears she had held back for 21 years. She cried for the young woman she had been, for the dreams she had to abandon, for the lonely nights, for the fears she had carried in silence. But she also cried with relief. For the first time in over 2 decades, she had no secrets to carry. The truth was finally in the hands of the one who had the most right to know it. Meanwhile, Sarah arrived at the Harrison Bourbon offices, with her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from her chest. She asked to speak with Michael Alexander urgently, and within 15 minutes she was standing in front of his office door. May I come in? Michael Alexander looked up from some documents and, seeing Sarah's expression, knew immediately that the moment he had both feared and longed for had arrived. Of course. Close the door, please. Sarah closed the door and remained standing in front of the desk, her arms crossed and her chin held high in a gesture Michael Alexander immediately recognized as identical to Emily's when she was determined. I know who you are, she said without preamble. Michael Alexander felt his mouth go dry, but he maintained his composure. What is it that you know? I know you're my father. I know you abandoned my mother when she was pregnant. I know you've been lying to me all these weeks while pretending to be just my boss. Michael Alexander rose slowly from his chair and walked to the window, turning his back to Sarah. Did your mother tell you? Yes, she did. But according to her, you've known who I was since my graduation day. That's true. Why didn't you say anything? Michael Alexander turned to face her, and Sarah could see his eyes were full of tears. Because I'm a coward, Sarah. Because I was afraid you would reject me. Because I didn't know how to explain 21 years of absence. Absence? It wasn't absence, it was abandonment. There's a difference. The word abandonment struck Michael Alexander like a physical blow. You're right. It was abandonment. It was the most cowardly and selfish decision of my life. Why did you do it? Michael Alexander sat on the edge of his desk, searching for the right words. Because I was a scared kid who thought he was a man. Because I thought love was a weakness and responsibility was a burden. Because my father had taught me that feelings were for the weak and that problems were solved with money. And now? What do you think now? Now, I think I lost the greatest opportunity of my life. Now I think your mother is the bravest woman I've ever known, and that you are the most beautiful miracle that could have ever existed. Sarah felt tears threatening to return, but she remained firm. What do you want from me? I want to get to know you. I want to know who you really are, not just as an employee, but as my daughter. I want to somehow make up for all the lost years. And my mum. What do you want from her? Michael Alexander looked down. I want to beg for her forgiveness on my knees. I want her to know that I regret hurting her every single day. I want her to give me the chance to show her I'm not the man I was. Do you love her? The question took Michael Alexander by surprise. What? My mom. Do you love her? Michael Alexander was silent for a long moment, thinking about the answer. I loved her then, though I didn't know how to recognize it until I lost her. And I've loved her all these years, though I didn't realize it until I saw her again. Have you told her that? No? Why not? Because I have no right. Because she has already suffered enough because of me. Because it would be selfish of me to ask her to risk her heart again. Sarah studied him in silence for several minutes, evaluating his sincerity, searching his face for any sign of a lie or manipulation. Okay, she said finally. Okay, what? Okay, you can get to know me. But it's going to be on my terms. Whatever you want. First, you don't change my last name, you don't give me money, you don't buy me things. If you want to know me, you get to know me as I am, without trying to buy my affection. Agreed. Second, you completely respect my mother. You don't pressure her, you don't pursue her, you don't make her feel uncomfortable. If she doesn't want to see you, you don't see her. Agreed. Third, you give me time. Don't pretend that overnight we're going to have a father-daughter relationship. That is earned, not demanded. Agreed. And fourth, if at any point I feel you are hurting me or my mum, you disappear from our lives forever. Understood? Michael Alexander nodded, feeling a mixture of respect and admiration for his daughter's strength of character. Understood. Anything else? Sarah approached the desk and placed her hands on the wooden surface. One more question. Are you worth knowing? Is it worth risking the peace that my mom and I have built for the possibility that you've really changed? Michael Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. I don't know, Sarah. I only know that I'm going to do everything in my power to be worthy of that chance. Sarah nodded and headed for the door. I'll see you tomorrow then, but not as boss and employee anymore, as two people who are trying to understand each other. When Sarah left, Michael Alexander remained alone in his office, feeling that the most important chapter of his life had just begun. That night, Emily, Sarah, and Michael Alexander all slept little, each processing the day's events and preparing for what would come next. The future of the family that had never been was about to be decided. The Chapter 3. The next 2 months were a period of both painful and beautiful discoveries. Michael and Sarah began to meet weekly, always in neutral places: Centennial Park, the historic downtown district, small coffee shops in the 12 South neighborhood where they could talk without interruption. The first official meeting as father and daughter was at the Frist Art Museum, surrounded by its diverse collection. Michael had arrived early, as nervous as a teenager on a first date. When he saw Sarah walking toward him through the Art Deco corridors, he was surprised at how natural it felt to call her daughter in his mind. "What do you want me to call you?" was Sarah's first question, as they sat on a bench in front of a large, dramatic painting titled The Phoenix. "Whatever you're most comfortable with," Michael replied. "I have no right to demand any title. Mr. Harrison sounds too formal now that I know who you are. Michael Alexander is too long. Can I call you Michael?" "I would love that." It was a small but significant step. It was the first time in 21 years that someone of his own blood had called him by his first name with affection. "Tell me about your childhood," Sarah asked. Michael was surprised by the question. He had expected her to ask about the abandonment, about the reasons, about the excuses. But Sarah wanted to know him as a person, not just as the man who had hurt her mother. "I grew up on the estate in the hills, surrounded by fields of corn as far as the eye could see. My father, your grandfather Alexander, was a very hard man. He believed that tenderness made men weak, that emotions were a luxury we couldn't afford." "Was he mean to you?" "Not mean in the sense that he never hit me or yelled at me, but he was never affectionate either. He never hugged me, never told me he was proud of me, never comforted me when I was scared. It was like living with a general instead of a father." "And your mom, my grandmother?" Michael smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Your grandmother Grace was the complete opposite. She was the one who suggested your name." "She did?" "Your mother asked me what names I liked when she was pregnant. I mentioned Sarah, a name my mother always loved. Emily said she thought it was perfect." Sarah felt a strange emotion knowing her name had been chosen by both parents, that it had been one of the few moments of agreement between them. "My grandmother Grace was the soul of the house," Michael continued. "She sang while she cooked, tended a garden full of hydrangeas and roses, and told me stories every night before I went to sleep. She died when I was 15, and I swear all the warmth left the estate with her. Do you think if she had been alive when I was born, things would have been different?" Michael considered the question carefully. "I think she would have been thrilled to meet you. I think she would have defended your mother and forced me to do the right thing. But I also think I was such a coward at that moment that I would have found some excuse anyway. At least you're honest. It's the least I can do after so many lies." The meetings continued, each one revealing new layers of who they were as people. Michael discovered that Sarah had inherited his love for music. He played guitar, and she had taught herself to play on a cheap keyboard Emily had bought second-hand. Sarah discovered that Michael wrote poetry in secret, a sensitive side he hid from the business world. "Will you read me a poem?" she asked during their 4th meeting, as they walked along the shores of Percy Priest Lake. "They're very bad," he said, embarrassed. "I don't care, I want to know what you think about when no one is watching." Michael pulled a small leather-bound notebook from his jacket and read with a trembling voice, "In the fields of amber corn, where time stands still, lives the echo of a laugh I never knew. On Tennessee nights when the wind whispers low, I hear the sound of small footsteps I never followed. In this heart of stone I thought had no cracks, grows an impossible flower I never watered." Sarah stopped in the middle of the path, her eyes full of tears. "Is that poem about me?" "I wrote it 5 years ago, on your birthday. I write one every year on the day you were born, even though I don't know how you celebrate, even though I can't be there." "Have you written poems about my mom too?" Michael looked down. "I've written whole books about your mom." While father and daughter began to get to know each other, Emily watched from a distance with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was happy to see Sarah blossoming, to see how meeting her father gave her a sense of completeness she hadn't known she was missing. On the other hand, there were days when she felt strangely lonely, as if her central role in her daughter's life was being displaced. The crisis came in July, during the 4th of July holiday. Michael had invited Sarah to celebrate at the family estate, where he hosted an annual party for all the employees and their families. It was a tradition he had inherited from his father, but one he had made warmer and more personal. "Do you want to come with me, Mom?" Sarah asked as she got ready for the party. Emily was sitting on the bed watching her daughter try on different dresses. "No, honey, that's your chance to meet your father's side of the family. I have no place there." But Michael specifically asked if you would come. "Michael? That's what I call him now. Does it bother you?" Emily was surprised by the pang of jealousy she felt. "No, honey, it's fine. It's just going to take me some time to get used to you having a relationship with him." Sarah sat next to her mother, taking her hands. "Mom, are you jealous?" "I don't know what I'm feeling, Sarah. I'm happy you're getting to know your dad, but I'm also scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of losing you. Scared that when you see everything he can offer you, you'll realize how little I was able to give you." Sarah hugged her mother tightly. "Mom, listen to me. Michael may be my biological father, but you're the one who raised me. You're the one who taught me to walk, who comforted me when I cried, who worked 3 jobs so I could go to school. He may have money and a big estate, but you have something he will never have. 21 years of my unconditional love." Emily cried in her daughter's arms, feeling the fear begin to dissolve. "Besides," Sarah added with a mischievous smile, "I get the impression he's more interested in seeing you than in showing off his estate to me." "What do you mean?" "In every conversation we have, he finds a way to ask about you, how you are, what you're doing, if you're happy, if you need anything. Yesterday he asked me if you still have the same laugh you used to." Emily felt her heart speed up. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him he'd have to ask you himself." That night, Sarah went to the estate alone. The celebration was exactly as Michael had described it to her. Warm, familiar, full of music and traditional food. A country band played on the main lawn, while children ran between the tables and adults danced under strings of red, white, and blue lights. Michael introduced her to everyone as his daughter, with a pride he couldn't hide. Sarah met her aunts, uncles, cousins, and the employees who had known of her only as an idea in her father's dreams. They all welcomed her with genuine warmth, as if she had been part of their lives forever. But there was a moment during the fireworks that lit up the Tennessee sky when Sarah saw Michael walk away from the celebration and head alone toward the cornfields. She followed him, finding him sitting on a stone fence looking at the stars. "Are you okay?" "I'm thinking about your mother," he replied without turning to look at her. "I've always liked celebrating the 4th here, but tonight I realized something is missing." "What's missing?" "The person who would give all of this meaning, the woman who should be by my side watching our daughter grow up. Emily is missing." Sarah sat next to him on the fence. "Do you love her?" "More than I've ever loved anyone." "Have you told her?" "How can I tell her I love her after all the damage I did? How can I ask her to trust me again?" "Maybe you don't have to ask her anything. Maybe you just have to show her you've changed." "And how do I prove that?" Sarah smiled, a plan forming in her mind. "Leave it to me." Montuii, the Chapter 4. Sarah's plan began to take shape during a seemingly casual conversation with her mother, 3 days after the 4th of July celebration at the estate. It was a rainy October afternoon, and both were in the small apartment preparing pies for the next day's market. The aroma of dough and cinnamon filled the space, while the rain drummed against the window pane. "Mom, have you ever thought about studying something?" Sarah asked as she rolled out pie crusts. Emily looked up, surprised by the question. "Study? Honey, I'm too old for that." "That's not true. Mrs. Davis started taking reading classes when she was 70. You're only 41. But I didn't even finish high school, Sarah. I dropped out to work when your grandmother died. That's exactly my point. You never had the chance to decide what you wanted to be when you grew up." Emily grew thoughtful, her hands automatically crimping the edges of a pie. "When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a teacher," she confessed after a long silence. "I liked helping my younger brothers with their homework, making up games to help them learn. So why not pick that up again?" "Oh, honey, how could I study? I barely have time to breathe between work and keeping the house." "But I'm working now too. I can help more with the bills. And there are programs for adults who want to finish their education." Emily looked at her daughter curiously. "Why are you asking me this all of a sudden?" Sarah had rehearsed this part of the conversation. "Because on Saturday I saw a flyer at the community college about a special program for women wanting to go back to school. They have classes on weekends and in the evenings. I thought of you." It was a half-truth. The program existed, but Sarah had found out about it because Michael had mentioned it. He had been quietly funding adult education programs in several Tennessee counties, and when Sarah told him about Emily's truncated dreams, he saw an opportunity. "I don't know, honey. It would be so hard. Mom, your whole life has been hard. You raised a daughter alone, worked 3 jobs, built a life for us with your own 2 hands. Compared to all that, how hard can it be to sit in a classroom? Emily smiled, recognizing her own tenacity in her daughter's words. What if I'm not smart enough anymore? It's been so many years. Mom, you taught me. You helped me with all my homework from elementary school through high school. You explained math to me that you'd never even formally studied. You're smarter than you think. That night, Emily lay awake thinking about the conversation. She pictured herself in a classroom with new books, learning things she had always wanted to know. She imagined herself graduating, maybe even becoming the teacher she had dreamed of being at 8 years old. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to dream of something for herself, not just for her daughter. The next day, Sarah put the second part of her plan into motion. She arrived early at the Harrison Bourbon offices and went straight to Michael's study. "I have a proposal," she said without preamble. "I'm listening. My mom wants to study, but she doesn't have the resources. You fund educational programs. Could you help her without her knowing it comes from you?" Michael leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "How?" "We create a special grant for women her age who want to return to their studies. We tell her she was selected on her own merit for her story of perseverance. And if she finds out I'm behind it, we take that risk. But I think it's worth it. She needs something that makes her feel valuable for who she is, not just as my mother." Michael smiled, admiring his daughter's emotional intelligence. "You know you're manipulating both your mother and me, right?" "Yes. Does it bother you?" "I love it. It means you're as smart as your mother and as determined as I am. A dangerous combination." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes. But I want to add something to your plan." "What?" "I want the classes to be at a school near where she works, and I want the program to include free transportation and materials. No excuses for her not to attend." "What if she gets suspicious?" "We'll say it's a pilot program from the state government. Technically it's not a lie because I'll donate it through my official contacts." The third part of the plan required the unwitting participation of Mrs. Davis. Sarah went to visit her that afternoon, finding her watering plants in the courtyard. "Mrs. Davis, I need your help. Tell me, child, do you think my mom would be happy if she had the chance to study?" The old woman set down her watering can and sat in her wicker chair studying Sarah's face. "Your mother has sacrificed all her dreams for you. It's time she got them back, but she's going to need a push." "Exactly. Could you convince her to enroll in an adult studies program?" "What program?" Sarah explained the details, carefully omitting Michael's involvement. "Look, honey," Mrs. Davis said after listening to everything, "I see what you're doing. You're trying to give your mother something to make her happy in her own right, so she doesn't feel so threatened by your father's presence in your lives." Sarah was surprised by the old woman's insight. "Is it that obvious?" "To someone who's lived as long as I have, yes, but it's a good plan, child. Your mother needs to remember who she is besides being your mom, and your father needs to prove he can be generous without expecting anything in return. Will you help me?" "Of course, but on one condition." "What's that?" "When all this works and your parents are back together again, you invite me to the wedding." Sarah laughed, hugging the old woman. "You've got a deal." The following week, Mrs. Davis began her campaign of persuasion. Every morning when Emily came out to hang the laundry, she found the old woman reading the newspaper aloud, commenting on different educational programs. "Look here, Emily. It says they're giving out grants for women who want to finish their studies. Wouldn't it be lovely if someone like you took advantage of these opportunities?" "Mrs. Davis, you know I don't have time for that." "You make time, child. When I decided to learn to read, I thought I didn't have time either. But my granddaughter told me something that changed my perspective." "What did she tell you?" "She said, 'Grandma, you always find time to take care of others. Why can't you find time to take care of yourself?'" Emily fell silent, processing the words. On the fourth day of Mrs. Davis's campaign, an official letter arrived addressed to Emily. The envelope bore the seal of the Tennessee Department of Education. Emily opened it with trembling hands, fearing it was some bureaucratic problem. But the letter read, "Dear Mrs. Emily Smith, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to participate in the New Horizons Special Education Program for Women. This program is designed for women who, due to life circumstances, were unable to complete their basic studies and who demonstrate special merit through their contribution to their communities. Your nomination was made by the Nashville Community Development Committee, which recognizes your history as a working mother and an exemplary member of your neighborhood. The program includes free classes on Saturdays and Sundays, all study materials at no cost, free transportation from your residence, personalized tutorial support, official certification upon completion of the program. Classes begin next Saturday at 9:00 a.m. at the Benjamin Franklin Adult Education Center located at... Emily read the letter 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. She ran to Mrs. Davis's apartment waving the paper. Mrs. Davis, look at this. The old woman read the letter with a perfectly feigned expression of surprise. Oh, child, how wonderful, you see? The universe is giving you a sign. But I didn't apply for any program. How is it possible I was selected? Sometimes opportunities just come to you, Emily. The important thing is whether or not you're going to take them. That night, Emily showed the letter to Sarah, who feigned surprise and excitement. Mom, this is incredible. You have to accept. But honey, what about my job? What about the pies on the weekends? I'll take care of the pies, and your work during the week can be organized. Mom, this is your chance. You can't let it go to waste. Emily stayed up all night, looking at the letter in the light of the candle she always kept lit in front of her mother's picture. It was as if life were giving her a second chance, not just to study, but to discover who she could be besides a mother and a worker. The following Saturday, Emily got up before dawn. She showered carefully, put on her best dress, the same one she had worn to Sarah's graduation, and nervously awaited the arrival of her transport. The vehicle that arrived was a clean, comfortable van, driven by an older gentleman who greeted her respectfully. Mrs. Emily Smith? Yes, that's me. I'm Thomas, your driver for the education program. We'll pick up 2 more ladies and then I'll take you to the center. During the ride, Emily met Rose, a 45-year-old woman who had been a homemaker all her life and now wanted to study accounting to start a small business. And Patricia, 38, who had left school to care for her younger siblings and now dreamed of being a nurse. The 3 women shared their stories, their fears, and their dreams during the trip. Emily realized she wasn't the only one who had postponed her own desires for the needs of others. The Benjamin Franklin Adult Education Center was a modern, bright building with classrooms equipped with up-to-date technology, but a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The program director, Professor Helen Martin, greeted them personally. Welcome, ladies. Today you begin a new stage of your lives. Here, there is no age for learning, no dream too late, no goal too impossible. The first class was English and literature. Emily sat in the front row with a new notebook and a pencil she held as if it were a treasure. When the professor asked why they had decided to study, Emily timidly raised her hand. I always wanted to be a teacher since I was a little girl, but circumstances, well, I never could. And now, what motivates you now? Emily thought of Sarah, of Michael, of all the years she had lived defined solely by her role as a struggling single mother. Now I'm motivated by the idea of discovering who I am when I'm not being someone's mom or someone's employee. I want to get to know Emily, the whole person. The entire class applauded, and Emily felt an emotion she hadn't experienced in decades, pride in herself. While Emily was living her first day as a student, Michael spent a nervous morning at his estate. He had discreetly hired someone to monitor the program, not to spy on Emily, but to make sure everything went perfectly. Mr. Harrison, Mr. Peterson reported over the phone. Mrs. Smith arrived on time. She seems very happy. She's participating a lot in class. Does she seem comfortable? She seems happy, boss, like she's been waiting for this her whole life. Michael felt a deep satisfaction. For the first time in 21 years, he was doing something for Emily that wasn't about guilt or regret, but about genuine love. That afternoon, when Sarah got home from work, she found Emily radiant, organizing her study materials on the small table that served as a desk, dining table, and sewing station. How was it, Mum? Oh, honey, it was wonderful. The teachers are so patient. My classmates are women like me with similar stories. And you know what the best part is? What? I realized I haven't forgotten how to learn. My mind still works just fine. I can do this. Sarah hugged her mother, feeling that the first part of her plan had worked perfectly. Over the following weeks, Emily transformed. Saturdays and Sundays became her favorite days. She would come home with her eyes shining, telling Sarah everything she had learned, showing her the homework, practicing the lessons out loud. Today we learned about the romantic literary movement, she'd tell her while they prepared dinner. Did you know that romanticism wasn't just about love, but about freedom and feelings in general? I didn't know, Mom. Tell me more. The professor told us that romanticism valued individuality, personal expression, the importance of following your heart as well as your head. Emily spoke with a passion Sarah hadn't seen since she was very little, and her mother would make up bedtime stories for her. Do you have a favorite writer? Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He wrote about lost love, about the hope that survives disappointment. His poems get me right here, Emily said, touching her chest. That night, Sarah told Michael about Emily's progress. They had gotten into the habit of talking on the phone each night, a routine that had started as reports on the plan, but had turned into genuine conversations between a father and daughter. She's happy, Sarah told him. happier than I've seen her in years. Do you think she suspects anything? I don't think so. She's so thrilled with the experience that she hasn't started questioning how the opportunity came about. And you? How are you feeling about all this? Good. It's strange to see my mom having a life that doesn't revolve around me, but it's also liberating. I realized I had also put a lot of pressure on myself to be her entire source of happiness. Sarah, there's something I want to tell you. What? I'm proud of you. Not just as a father, but as a person. What you're doing for your mother, the way you're helping us heal, you're an extraordinary woman. I learned from my mom, and from me too, I hope. A little bit, Sarah admitted with a smile in her voice. By the end of October, Emily had completed her first month in the educational program. Her grades were excellent, her class participation was enthusiastic, and she had developed genuine friendships with her fellow students. But most importantly, there was a change in her posture, in the way she walked, in the way she spoke about herself. She no longer described herself just as Sarah's mom or the one who sells pies. Now she was Emily the student, or Emily the future teacher. One afternoon, while she was studying in the courtyard under the oak tree, Mrs. Davis approached with 2 cups of coffee. "How are the studies coming along, child?" "Very well, Mrs. Davis. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. Have you ever wondered how you were selected for this program?" Emily looked up from her books, a curious expression on her face. "At first it seemed strange, but then I just thought that sometimes life surprises you with good things. Doesn't it seem curious that the program appeared just when Sarah started working for a company that funds educational programs?" Emily froze, processing Mrs. Davis's words. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm not saying anything, child. I'm just asking if you've considered all the possibilities." That night, Emily couldn't concentrate on her homework. The seed of doubt Mrs. Davis had planted germinated quickly. She began to recall details, how specific the program was for women her age, how convenient the location was, how perfect the timing had been. The next day, instead of going directly to class, Emily asked the driver, Thomas, to take her to the Department of Education offices first. She wanted to verify the information about the program. In the Special Programs Department, after asking several questions, she discovered that the New Horizons program was real, but that it was funded by an anonymous private donation channeled through the Harrison Bourbon Foundation. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. Michael Alexander was behind her opportunity to study. Her first reaction was fury. How dare he manipulate her life again? How dare he make her feel like she had earned something on her own merit when it was really just another one of his handouts? But later, sitting on a park bench across from the government offices, she began to consider the implications more deeply. Michael had funded her education without asking for anything in return, without even telling her it was him. If Mrs. Davis hadn't planted the seed of doubt, she would have never known. It wasn't a manipulation to control her or make her feel indebted. It was an anonymous gift. Besides, regardless of who had paid for the program, she had done the work. Her grades were real, her progress was genuine, her happiness was authentic. The knowledge she had gained was hers, no matter who had funded the opportunity. Emily stayed in the park until dusk began to fall, torn between wounded pride and the recognition of a loving gesture. Finally, she made a decision. She was going to confront Michael, but not to fight with him, to understand why he had done it. The next day, after her classes, Emily asked Thomas to take her to the Harrison Bourbon offices instead of home. "Ma'am, are you sure? I'm not authorized to deviate from the route. Tell whoever you need to tell that Emily Smith needs to speak with Michael Alexander Harrison, urgently." An hour later, Emily was standing outside the door to Michael's office, her heart pounding as hard as it had the first time she saw him, 21 years ago. The secretary announced her, and Michael's voice came from inside. "Let her in, please." Emily opened the door and entered, closing it behind her. Michael was standing by the window, his back to her. When he turned to see her, Emily noticed he looked nervous. "Emily, what a surprise to see you here. Is it a surprise? Or were you expecting that sooner or later I'd figure it out?" Michael knew immediately what she was talking about. "You found out about the program." "I found out the Harrison Bourbon Foundation funds the program." "Coincidence?" Michael approached slowly, keeping his distance but also showing he had no intention of hiding. "It's not a coincidence." "Why?" "Because Sarah told me you had wanted to be a teacher. Because I saw an opportunity to give you something you truly wanted, with no expectations, no strings attached." "No strings? Michael, you've been funding me without my knowledge. That's manipulation. Would you feel better if I had come to your house with a check and said, 'Here's money to study'? Or if I had made you feel like it was charity?" Emily fell silent, recognizing the validity of his point. "Besides," Michael continued, "technically I'm not funding you specifically. I'm funding a program for all the women who qualify. You qualified on your own merit. But the program exists because you created it. The program exists because there are women like you who deserve second chances. I just provided the money. You're doing the work. Emily sat in one of the chairs in front of the desk, feeling her fury transform into something more complex. Does Sarah know? Michael hesitated before answering. It was Sarah's idea. What? She asked me to help you study without you knowing it came from me. She organized this whole thing. Emily felt a mixture of surprise, admiration, and exasperation toward her daughter. That girl loves you so much she moved heaven and earth to give you something that would make you happy. And she knows you so well that she knew you wouldn't accept it if it came directly from me. And why did you agree to help her? Michael sat in the chair on the other side of the desk, looking her directly in the eyes. Because I want to see you happy, Emily. Because for 21 years, I've thought about all the opportunities I took from you when I abandoned you. Because if I can't give you back the lost time, at least I can help you make the most of the time that's left. And you expect nothing in return? I expect you to be happy, that's all. Emily studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or hidden expectations. But what she saw was honesty, vulnerability, and something that took her breath away. Unconditional love. How much longer will the program last? 6 more months. After that, if you want to continue studying to become a teacher, the program can be extended or connected to a university. And if I decide not to continue, then I will have had the privilege of seeing you happy for 8 months, and that will be more than I deserve. Emily stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city stretching toward the hills. Do you know what bothers me most about all this? What? That it's working, that I'm happier than I've been in years, that I feel alive again, that I discovered I can still dream. That bothers you? Emily turned to look at him. It bothers me that it came from you. It bothers me that after all these years, after all the pain, you're still capable of making me feel cared for. The words hung in the air between them, laden with a vulnerability neither of them had expected. Emily, no, she interrupted him. Don't say anything yet. I need to think about all this. I need to decide what I'm going to do with this information. Are you going to drop out of the program? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'll finish it, and then I'll pay you back every penny you spent on me. I don't want your money, Emily. What do you want then? Michael was quiet for a long moment, struggling between honesty and prudence. I want a chance to prove I'm not the man who hurt you. I want the chance to get to know the woman you've become. I want... He stopped, not daring to say the rest. What else do you want, Michael? I want to love you the way I should have loved you from the beginning. The silence that followed was so intense that they could both hear their own heartbeats. Emily walked to the desk, placed her hands on the wooden surface, and looked him directly in the eyes. If I'm going to finish this program, it's going to be on my terms, whatever you say. First condition, no more secrets. If you're going to be a part of my life in any way, everything has to be transparent. I accept. Second condition, this doesn't put me in your debt. You don't owe me anything, but I don't owe you anything either. We're even. I accept. Third condition, Sarah comes first, always. If at any point your presence in our lives hurts or confuses her, you walk away. I accept. And fourth condition, I set the pace. If I want to get to know you again, we do it at my speed. If I decide I can't forgive the past, you respect that decision. I accept. Emily stood up straight, feeling she had regained some control over the situation. Then I'm going to finish my education program, and when I graduate, I'll decide if the man who funded my education is someone I want to build a future with. Is that a possibility? Emily walked to the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. 21 years ago, it was a possibility and you wasted it. Don't waste this one. When Emily left, Michael remained alone in his office, feeling he had just received the greatest gift of his life, a real second chance. That night, Emily came home late. Sarah was waiting for her, worried. Mom, where were you? Thomas told me you didn't come back with him. Emily sat next to her daughter on the bed they shared. I was talking to your father. Sarah tensed up. My father? Why? Because I found out he's funding my education program. Mom, I can explain. He already explained, and he explained that it was your idea. Sarah looked down, expecting a scolding. Honey, look at me. Sarah looked up, surprised to see no anger in her mother's face. Why did you do it? Because I saw you were happy studying, but I also saw you were worried about money. Because I thought if Michael could help without you knowing, it would be perfect. Because I wanted you to be happy without feeling like you owed anything to anyone. Emily hugged her daughter. Honey, what you did was wrong. You lied to me. You manipulated the situation. You took away my chance to decide for myself. I'm sorry, Mom, but it was also right. You gave me the chance to discover who I am when I'm not worrying about you. You helped me get my dreams back. Are you angry? I'm confused, but not angry. And I'm going to finish the program. Are you going to keep seeing Michael? Emily smiled for the first time in the conversation. I'm going to see what happens, but by my own rules this time. Does that mean there's hope? It means there are possibilities. And sometimes possibilities are enough to start with. That night, for the first time in 21 years, Emily fell asleep thinking about Michael not with pain or resentment, but with curiosity about what the future might hold. Chapter 5. The next 3 months passed like a slow waltz between 3 people learning to be a family. Emily continued her studies, but now with the transparency of knowing who funded them. Michael began to participate more actively in Sarah's life, not just as an employer, but as a father who wanted to know his daughter's dreams and fears. And Sarah became the bridge between her parents, watching with hope as they reacquainted themselves. The meetings between Emily and Michael started out formal, encounters in public coffee shops where they discussed Emily's educational progress and Sarah's future plans. But gradually, the conversations became more personal. What was your life like before you met me? Emily asked one crisp January afternoon as they shared a coffee in Centennial Park. The winter sun was low in the sky, and the sound of the fountains mixed with the murmur of people enjoying the cold air. Michael stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Empty, he answered after a moment, full of obligations and expectations, but empty of real purpose. My father had designed a path for me. Study business, take control of the family company, marry some woman from a good family, have children to carry on the name. And how did you feel about that plan? I had never questioned if I had another choice, until I met you. Emily felt a small flutter in her stomach but maintained her composure. What changed when you met me? Everything. For the first time in my life, someone saw me as Michael, not as the Harrison heir. You laughed at my bad jokes. You listened when I talked about my secret dreams of writing. You made me feel I was interesting for what I thought, not for what I owned. You had dreams of writing. Since I was a boy, I wanted to be a poet, or at least write songs, but my father said those were frivolities for men who didn't have real responsibilities. Emily remembered the poems Michael had read to Sarah, and another piece of the puzzle began to fit. Do you still write? Every day. It's the only way I have to process what I feel. Have you written about us? Michael nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly. Would you like to read something? Emily hesitated. Reading Michael's poetry would be like looking directly into his soul, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that intimacy. Maybe someday, she replied. Those conversations became regular. Each meeting revealed new layers of who they had been and who they had become during the years of separation. Emily told him about the nights she had cried from exhaustion after working all day, but also about the immense satisfaction she felt every time Sarah achieved something new. Michael told her about the years he had tried to drown his guilt in work and alcohol, and about the day he realized that no professional success would ever fill the void he'd created by losing them. But there was one topic that neither of them dared to touch directly: what they felt for each other now. The answer to that question began to reveal itself in mid-February. During an event neither had planned, Emily had developed a severe headache during her Saturday class. It was unusual for her, as she was almost never sick, but the pain was so intense that the professor suggested she go home early. Thomas drove her to the apartment complex, but when Emily tried to get out of the van, she became so dizzy she had to sit down on the curb. Mrs. Davis saw her from her window and came rushing out. What's wrong, child? My head hurts so much, Mrs. Davis, and I feel so dizzy. Let's get you to a doctor. This doesn't look right. I don't have money for a doctor right now. It'll pass. Mrs. Davis was not a woman to accept excuses when it came to health. Thomas, she yelled to the driver, who was waiting to make sure Emily got inside safely. Take her to the hospital right now. But ma'am, I'm not authorized to. Take her to the hospital, or I'll call Mr. Harrison myself. The mention of Michael's name settled the matter. Thomas helped Emily back into the van and drove her straight to Nashville General Hospital. On the way, Emily lost consciousness. Thomas carried her into the emergency room and gave the only information he had, Emily's name and Michael's phone number, which was on the emergency contact list for the education program. Michael arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. He found Emily on an ER gurney, still unconscious, with IV tubes connected to her arm. What happened? He asked the doctor attending to her. Are you family? Michael hesitated for a second before answering. I'm the father of her child. The patient has a severe infection that has developed into meningitis. Her blood pressure is very low and she has a high fever. We need to run more tests, but she will require immediate hospitalization. Michael felt the world tilt around him. Is it serious? It is. But if we respond quickly, the prognosis can be good. Do whatever is necessary. Money is no object. We need to contact her direct family. Does she have any children? One daughter, Sarah. I'll call her right now. Michael walked into the hospital corridor with trembling hands, dialing Sarah's number. When she answered, her voice was cheerful. Hey, how are you? Sarah, I need you to come to Nashville General immediately. Your mother is sick. The silence on the other end of the line was terrifying. How sick? Meningitis. She's unconscious. Come now, please. I'm on my way. The next few hours were the longest of Michael's life. Sarah arrived in a rush, her eyes red from crying during the cab ride. Together they waited outside the intensive care unit, where Emily had been moved. How did this happen? Sarah asked between sobs. The driver said she felt sick in class and that when she got home she collapsed. But she never gets sick. Never. Michael put an arm around Sarah's shoulders, and for the first time she didn't pull away. She took refuge in his embrace like a small child needing comfort. She's going to be okay, he whispered. Your mom is the strongest woman I know. She's going to be okay. But internally Michael was terrified. The possibility of losing Emily just as he had begun to hope for a future with her paralyzed him with fear. The doctor came out of the ICU around midnight. The infection is responding to the antibiotics, he informed them. Her fever is coming down. We believe she's out of danger, but she'll need to stay in the hospital for at least a week. Can we see her? Sarah asked. You can go in for 5 minutes each. Sarah went in first. Emily was awake but very weak, connected to several monitors that beeped steadily. Mom, Sarah whispered, taking her hand. Hi, honey, Emily replied in a hoarse voice. Are you okay? Even sick, after being unconscious for hours, Emily's first concern was for her daughter. I'm fine, Mum. You're the one I'm worried about. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm too stubborn to die that easily. Sarah laughed through her tears. Michael is here, she said. He wants to see you. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. Did he bring me to the hospital? Yes, he's been here all night with me. Let him in. When Michael entered the room, Emily looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen since they were young. Absolute vulnerability. Hey, he said simply. Hey, he replied, slowly approaching the bed. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. The doctor says you're going to be fine. Yeah, so they told me. They were silent for a moment, aware that they had crossed an invisible line. In moments of crisis, defenses fall, and the truth emerges. Michael, Emily said finally. Yes? Thank you for taking care of Sarah tonight. You don't have to thank me. She's my daughter too. I know, and it gives me great peace to know that if anything were to happen to me, she wouldn't be alone. Michael felt a pang in his chest. Nothing is going to happen to you, Emily. But if it did, it won't. Emily smiled weakly. You're very stubborn. I learned from the best. During the week Emily remained in the hospital, Michael visited her every day. At first, Sarah also came daily, but as Emily recovered, she began to space out her visits to give her parents room. It's obvious they love each other, she told Mrs. Davis one afternoon. They just need to remember how. Love is never forgotten, child. It just hides sometimes. It was true. With each passing day, Emily and Michael rediscovered the connection that had existed between them 21 years ago, but it was more mature now, based on real knowledge instead of pure passion. Michael read poems to her, his own and those of other authors. Emily told him about her classes and her new friends from the program. They talked about Sarah, about their hopes for their daughter's future, about how proud they were of the woman she had become. On the 5th day of her hospital stay, Emily asked him a question that took him by surprise. Why did you never get married? Michael had been reading a book by Robert Frost, but he looked up at the question. Who says I didn't? Emily felt a pang of jealousy that surprised her. You got married? No, he replied quickly, seeing the expression on her face. I didn't get married. I just wanted to see your reaction. That's cruel. You're right. I'm sorry. But why not? In all these years there must have been women. Michael closed the book and moved closer to the bed. There were women, yes. I tried to have serious relationships several times, but there always came a point when I realized I was comparing them to you, comparing them to me, to your laugh, to the way you moved your hands when you talked about something that excited you, to the way you looked at me as if you really saw me, not just what I represented. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Michael, I know it sounds pathetic. I know I had no right to hold on to those memories after what I did, but I couldn't help it. Every woman I met was wonderful in her own way, but none of them were you. And that's why you couldn't love anyone else. Oh, I could love. The problem is I was already in love with someone. And that love never went away, no matter how hard I tried to bury it. The words hung in the hospital room air like a confession that had waited 21 years to be spoken. Are you telling me you've loved me all these years? I'm telling you, I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Emily closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten to escape. Do you know how many times I dreamed of hearing you say that? And now that you've heard it? Emily opened her eyes and looked at him directly. Now I don't know what to do with that information. On the 7th day, when Emily was discharged, Michael insisted on driving her home himself instead of sending Thomas. During the drive to the apartment complex, Emily noticed he seemed nervous. Are you okay? She asked. Emily, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been holding on to for years that I think you have a right to know. Emily felt her muscles tense. What is it? Michael parked the truck outside the complex, but didn't get out right away. It's about the money I offered you when you were pregnant. Michael, we already talked about that. It doesn't matter anymore. Yes, it does, because I didn't tell you the whole truth. Emily turned to face him completely. What truth? The money I offered you, and it wasn't for you to have an abortion. What? It was for you to leave, for you to disappear with the baby so I could pretend it never happened. Emily felt as if the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Are you telling me you wanted me to have the baby? Yes, but far away from me, away from my family, away from everything I knew. Why? Michael looked down, ashamed. Because I was afraid of what my parents would say. I was afraid they would disinherit me. I was afraid the scandal would ruin the family's reputation. But you were afraid of something else too, weren't you? Michael nodded slowly. I was afraid of loving you so much that I would lose control of my life. I was afraid that if you stayed, I could never be the man my father expected me to be. So you threw me away to save yourself. Yes, I was a complete coward. Emily was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. Why are you telling me this now? Because if we're going to try to build something together, it has to be on a foundation of complete truth. I can't keep pretending that what I did was just a youthful mistake. It was a conscious betrayal of the love you had for me. And what do you expect me to do with that information? I expect you to decide if you can forgive not just the stupid young man I was, but the cowardly man I chose to be. Emily opened the truck door and got out. But before closing it, she leaned in to look at him one last time. I'm going to need time to process this, Michael. All the time you need. And you? Are you going to wait for me while I decide? I'll wait for you for the rest of my life if I have to. Emily closed the door and walked toward the entrance of the complex, feeling her world had completely changed once again. That night, sitting in the courtyard under the oak tree, Emily told Mrs. Davis the entire conversation. The old woman listened in silence, rocking in her wicker chair. What do you think, Mrs. Davis? I think that man finally had the courage to tell you the whole truth. But how do I forgive something like that? He didn't just throw me out. He exiled me. He wanted me to completely disappear from his life. Child, forgiveness isn't for him, it's for you. What do you mean? It means as long as you keep carrying that wound, he will continue to have power over your happiness. Forgiveness frees you, not him. But how do I know if he's really changed? By his actions these last few months, by how he treats Sarah, by how he took care of you in the hospital, by the fact that he told you the truth, even though he knew he could lose you all over again. Emily thought about Mrs. Davis's words late into the night. The next day, Sarah noticed immediately that something had changed in her mother. Did something happen with Michael? He told me the truth about what really happened 21 years ago. And now I have to decide if I can love the man he is now, or if the pain of what he did before is stronger. What does your heart say? Emily smiled sadly. My heart says I love him, that I never stopped loving him, that every day of these 21 years has been incomplete without him. And what does your head say? My head says I'm a fool for even considering giving him another chance. And what does Emily, the whole person you're discovering in your classes, say? Emily grew thoughtful. Sarah's question forced her to consider something new. What did she want? Not as the wounded woman of the past or the protective mother, but as the woman she was becoming. Emily, the whole person, says that I deserve to be loved completely, and that if Michael Alexander can love me like that, then it's worth the risk. So you're going to give him another chance? I'm going to give myself another chance. To be loved as I deserve, to build the family I always dreamed we could be. Does that mean yes? Emily hugged her daughter, feeling that she finally had clarity about what she wanted. It means we're going to find out together. 3 days later, Emily called Michael and asked him to meet her at Centennial Park, where they had had many of their recent conversations. When he arrived, he found her sitting on a bench under a weeping willow, watching the ducks swim in the small lake. Thanks for coming, she said when he sat down beside her. Thanks for calling me. Have you made a decision? Yes. Michael held his breath. I've decided that I want to try to love you again. Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. Really? But with conditions. Whatever you want. Emily turned to look at him directly. First condition. This is starting from scratch. We are not the young people we were 21 years ago. We are two adults who have lived, who have made mistakes, who have learned. We're going to get to know each other again as the people we are now. Agreed. Second condition, we go slow. I'm not moving into your estate tomorrow, and we're not going to pretend we can make up for 2 decades in 2 months. Agreed. Third condition, Sarah is still my priority, but now she is our shared responsibility. We will make important decisions about her together. Agreed. And fourth condition, I want to finish my studies, and I want to work. I will not be a kept woman. I will contribute to this relationship as an equal. Emily, you don't need to work. Yes, I do need to. I need to feel that I am valuable for what I do, not just for what you can give me. Michael nodded, finally understanding that Emily had fundamentally changed from the 20-year-old girl he had known. One more condition, Emily added. What is it? I want you to tell me you love me every day, even if we're fighting, even if we have problems, even if life gets hard. I want to hear you say you love me every single day for the rest of our lives. Michael moved closer to her on the bench, took her face in his hands, and looked directly into her eyes. I love you, Emily Smith. I love you today. I loved you yesterday, and I will love you every day I have left. And then, after 21 years of separation, pain, growth, and rediscovery, Michael and Emily kissed under the weeping willow in Centennial Park, sealing not just their reconciliation, but the beginning of a love more mature, more conscious, and more real than the one they had shared in their youth. When they parted, Emily smiled, her eyes full of tears. Now, she whispered, now we're beginning. Chapter 6. The 6 months that followed the kiss under the weeping willow were like a second youth for Emily and Michael, but this time built on foundations of maturity, honesty, and mutual respect. It wasn't an easy path. There were days when the past emerged like a threatening shadow, moments when old fears tried to sabotage their new happiness, but they had both learned that true love isn't the absence of problems, but the will to face them together. Emily finished her education program with honors, graduating in an emotional ceremony where Michael and Sarah applauded her from the front row. Seeing her mother receive her certificate, radiant with pride and personal achievement, was one of the most beautiful moments of Sarah's life. I'm so proud of you, Mum, she said, hugging her after the ceremony. I'm proud of me too, Emily replied, and it was the first time in decades she could say those words with complete honesty. But the most significant moment came when Emily announced her decision to continue studying for her teaching degree. Michael had offered to finance her university studies, but Emily had other plans. I got an academic scholarship on my own merit, she announced to them during a dinner at the estate. Vanderbilt offered me a special program for outstanding adult students. Michael smiled, immediately understanding the importance of the gesture. A scholarship that has nothing to do with me? A scholarship that has everything to do with me, Emily responded with a smile full of satisfaction. Sarah watched her parents with a mixture of joy and amazement. In recent months, she had seen them rediscover each other, learn to communicate as adults, and build something genuinely new instead of trying to recreate the past. I have something to tell you guys, Sarah announced during that same dinner. Emily and Michael looked at her expectantly. They offered me a position at the Harrison Bourbon headquarters in New York City. It would be a major promotion, but it would mean moving for at least 2 years. The silence that followed was thick. Emily felt the immediate impulse to ask her daughter not to go, but she held back. Michael felt the temptation to withdraw the offer to keep Sarah close, but he also restrained himself. What do you want to do? Emily finally asked. I want to accept, Sarah replied. It's an incredible opportunity for my career, and I think you two need time to build your relationship without me in the middle. You're not in the middle, honey, Emily protested. I'm not in the middle, but I am a constant consideration. Every decision you make, you evaluate first in terms of how it affects me. It's understandable, but it also limits your ability to rediscover each other as a couple. Michael leaned back in his chair, once again admiring his daughter's emotional wisdom. When do you need to give them an answer? Next week. Then take the full week to think about it. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, we will support you. Emily nodded, though her mother's heart protested silently. Just promise me one thing, Emily added. What, Mum? That you're not making this decision for us, that you're making it for you. I promise. That night, after Sarah went home, Emily and Michael walked through the fields of the estate under the light of the full moon. It was a tradition they had started weeks ago, walking and talking, processing the day's events together. How do you feel about the possibility of her leaving? Michael asked. Terrified, Emily admitted. She's been my reason for living for 21 years. I don't know how to be just Emily instead of Emily, Sarah's mom. But that's exactly what you need to learn. I know, and she knows it too. That's why she wants to go, not just for the job opportunity, but to force all three of us to grow. She's very wise. Too wise for 21. Sometimes I think we raised an old soul in a young body. Michael laughed, taking Emily's hand as they walked. Do you know what I like most about this version of us? What? That we can talk about everything. That there are no forbidden topics, no secrets, no fear of being honest, even when the honesty hurts. Especially when the honesty hurts. They stopped in the middle of a field, surrounded by the rolling hills of Tennessee. Michael turned to Emily, taking her hands. Emily, there's something I want to ask you. What? Would you like to marry me? Emily's heart sped up, but she also noticed something different in the way Michael had asked the question. Are you proposing to me? I'm asking if you would like the idea of us getting married. It's different. Emily smiled, appreciating the distinction. How is it different? Because a proposal implies I've already made the decision, and I'm trying to convince you. A question about whether you'd like to get married implies it's a decision we're going to make together. I like that difference. And do you like the idea? Emily studied him in the silvery moonlight, seeing not just the man before her but the path they had traveled to reach this moment. I like the idea of being your wife. I like the idea of officially building a life together. I like the idea of Sarah seeing us as a real family. But I want it to be different from how it would have been 21 years ago. Different how? I want it to be a partnership of equals. I want to keep my identity, my career, my independence. I want our marriage to be a choice we renew every day, not an obligation we assume once. Michael nodded, understanding perfectly. Do you want to make a mutual proposal? What do you mean? Michael let go of her hands and knelt in the middle of the field under the full moon. Emily Smith, will you be my wife, my partner, my equal, my best friend, and the love of my life? Emily stood for a moment, looking at him with her eyes full of tears, and then she knelt in front of him. Michael Alexander Harrison, will you be my husband, my partner, my equal, my best friend, and the love of my life? Yes, they both answered at the same time, and they hugged in the middle of the field, sealing not only their engagement, but a new way of understanding love. Sarah accepted the job in New York City, but asked to delay her start date so she could help organize her parents' wedding. The ceremony was planned for October, a time when the autumn colors were at their peak and the air in Tennessee was crisp and clear. The preparations were an adventure in themselves. Emily insisted on a celebration that honored her humble roots, but also reflected the mature love they had built. Michael wanted something elegant but not ostentatious, meaningful but not pretentious. I want it to be at the estate, Emily said one afternoon as they reviewed venue options, but not in the fancy ballrooms. I want it to be outdoors, in the hills, where our story really began. Are you sure? It could be chilly or rain or... Michael, if we're going to get married, we're going to do it under the open sky, with the earth beneath our feet and nature as our witness, the way it should be. The wedding became an event that beautifully combined tradition and modernity. Emily wore a simple but elegant white dress from a local Nashville designer that allowed her to move freely. Michael wore a light linen suit with a tie handcrafted by a local artisan. The ceremony was officiated by a justice of the peace, but also included elements of their family traditions. They placed photos of their deceased parents on a special altar, and instead of a unity candle, they exchanged personal keepsakes from their pasts, and they wrote their own vows. Emily, Michael said when it was time for the vows, 21 years ago, I missed the chance to promise to love you for all the days of my life. Today, I want to rectify that omission. He took out a small leather notebook, the same one where he wrote his poems, and read, I promise to love you in the mornings when you wake up with messy hair and in the evenings when you're tired from the day. I promise to love you when you're happy and especially when you're sad. I promise to support you in all your dreams, even the ones I don't share, because your happiness is more important than my comfort. I promise to never again make important decisions without consulting you, because we are a team, and teams work together. I promise to guard your heart as the most precious treasure you have entrusted to me, and I promise that every single day, without fail, I will tell you that I love you, because important words should never be taken for granted. Emily took out her own notebook. She had started writing too, inspired by him, and responded, Michael, 21 years ago, I thought love was passion and eternal promises. Today, I know love is daily work and constant choice. I choose you today, not because you are perfect, but because you are perfect for me. I promise to be honest with you, even when honesty is difficult. I promise to maintain my own identity, while we build a shared one. I promise to love you not only for the man you are, but for the man you continue to strive to be. I promise that when we have problems, because we will have them, I will remember the entire road we have traveled to get here, and I promise I will never again allow pride to be stronger than love. When they kissed as husband and wife, sealing 21 years of separation and the beginning of a new life together, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Mrs. Davis, sitting in the front row in a new dress and with tears of joy, murmured, "It's about time." The celebration continued late into the night. There was a country band that played Emily's favorite songs, a folk dance troupe that performed traditional Appalachian numbers, and a local poet who recited verses about mature love. But the most emotional moment came when Sarah asked for the microphone. "I want to talk about my parents," she said, standing under the strings of lights that hung between the trees. "I grew up thinking my father was dead, and in a way, that's true. The cowardly man who abandoned my mother 21 years ago did die. In his place, a man capable of true love was born. And my mom was always strong, but watching her with Michael, I realized that strength can also include vulnerability. True power isn't in not needing anyone, but in choosing carefully who you need. You both taught me that love isn't a fairy tale where everything is perfect from the beginning. Love is a story of growth, of forgiveness, of second chances earned through effort. You taught me that it's never too late to rewrite your story. So I toast to Emily and Michael for proving that some loves are destined to find each other again and again until both people are ready to fully receive it. The toast was followed by applause and tears, and Emily and Michael knew they had achieved more than just getting married. They had healed a family and created a legacy of true love for their daughter. 3 months later, when Sarah moved to New York City, Emily and Michael accompanied her to the airport. It was the first time Emily had been separated from her daughter for more than a night, and although she knew it was the right thing, the pain of goodbye was real. "We're going to miss you so much," Emily said, hugging Sarah. "I'll miss you guys too, but now I know you'll both be okay. You're not just Sarah's mom and Sarah's dad anymore. You're Emily and Michael, and that's beautiful." "Are you going to call often?" Michael asked. "Every week, but I also want you to tell me about your life together, about the places you visit, the books you read, the new things you discover about each other." When Sarah's flight was announced, the three of them hugged in a tight circle. "I love you," Sarah said. "Both of you. Thank you for giving me the best gift a daughter could receive, parents who truly love each other." After Sarah left, Emily and Michael returned to the estate in silence. It was strange to be completely alone for the first time since they had resumed their relationship. The future stretched out before them like a blank canvas, full of possibilities. "Do you know what excites me most about all of this?" Emily asked that night as they prepared for bed in the room they now shared. "What? That we're going to grow old together. That we'll watch each other change, grow, become different versions of ourselves, and that we'll choose to love each other at every stage." Michael walked over to her, taking her face in his hands as he had done so many times in recent months. "I love you, Emily Harrison. I love you, Michael Alexander Harrison." And as they held each other on their first night as a married couple alone, they both knew they had found something more valuable than a second chance. They had found a love that was completely new, built on the wisdom of the past, but aimed toward the future. 6 months later, Emily received her first teaching assignment at a rural school near the estate. Michael had expanded his educational programs to include rural development grants, and Emily became the program director, combining her new career with her passion for helping other women. A year after their wedding, Sarah returned to Nashville for a visit and found her parents more in love than ever. Emily had lost the weight of constant worry and gained the lightness of someone who knows she is loved. Michael had lost the rigidity of a man who controls everything and gained the flexibility of one who knows life is richer when it's shared. "Do you ever have regrets?" Sarah asked them during a family dinner. "About what?" Emily asked. "About all the time you lost." Emily and Michael looked at each other and smiled. "No," Michael replied, "because that time wasn't lost. It was invested. I needed those 21 years to become the man who could love your mother as she deserves. And she needed that time to become the woman who doesn't need saving, but who chooses to share her life. Besides," Emily added, "if things had been different, maybe our story would have ended years ago. Maybe we needed the separation to value what we have now." "Do you think you'll be together forever?" "We'll be together as long as we decide to be," Michael replied, "and we're going to make that decision every day." That's the difference between young love and mature love. Emily explained. Young love promises forever without knowing what that means. Mature love promises today and then tomorrow, and then the day after that, one day at a time. 2 years after their wedding, Emily graduated as a teacher with high honors. Michael was in the front row at the ceremony, applauding with tears in his eyes as he watched his wife receive the degree she had dreamed of since she was a girl. That night, during the celebration at the estate, Emily announced that she had been accepted into a master's program to specialize in rural education. "You're going to study again?" Michael asked, feigning exasperation. "I'm going to study forever," Emily replied with a smile. "Now that I've discovered the pleasure of learning, I'm not going to waste it. And what am I going to do with a wife who is so smart? You're going to have to work hard to stay interesting." It was the kind of playful conversation they had developed, full of love but also mutual respect for each other's individual dreams. 5 years after their reconciliation, Emily and Michael had created a life that was exactly what they had both dreamed of but never dared to expect. They had a relationship based on friendship as well as love, on respect as well as passion, on honesty as well as tenderness. Sarah returned permanently to Nashville to lead the regional expansion of Harrison Bourbon, and soon after, she announced her engagement to Robert, an agricultural scientist she had met in New York who perfectly understood the complexities of her rebuilt family. "Are you ready to be grandparents?" Sarah asked them at the engagement dinner. Emily and Michael looked at each other and smiled. "We're ready to be whatever life asks us to be," Emily replied. Together. Sarah's wedding was held at the same location where her parents had married, continuing the family tradition of celebrating love under the open Tennessee sky. During the ceremony, as they watched their daughter exchange vows with the man she had chosen, Emily and Michael held hands and silently renewed their own vows. The first grandchild arrived 2 years later, a beautiful boy who had Emily's eyes, Michael's smile, and Sarah's determination. When Emily held him in her arms for the first time, she realized that life had given her the chance to watch love multiply infinitely. "What are we going to name him?" Michael asked, looking at the baby with an expression of total awe. "Alexander," Sarah replied without hesitation, "after his grandfather, but not for the man he was, but for the man he became." Michael wept upon hearing his daughter's words, understanding that he had finally managed to redeem not only his relationship with Emily, but his legacy as a father. On the 10th anniversary of their reconciliation, Emily and Michael renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony with only their close family present. This time Emily wore a golden dress that reflected the wisdom she had gained, and Michael read a poem he had written especially for the occasion. 10 years are not enough to erase 21 of pain, but they are enough to build a new life on the foundations of forgiveness. 10 years of waking up with you are worth more than 30 of waking up alone. 10 years of sharing dreams weigh more than decades of dreaming in solitude. Today I renew my promise not because it has worn out, but because it has deepened. I love you more than I did at the beginning, because now I know the true cost of love, and I am willing to pay that price every day I have left. After the ceremony, as they walked through the fields of the estate that had witnessed their love story, Emily reflected on the path they had traveled. "Do you know what the most beautiful part of all this is?" she said to Michael. "What?" "That our story isn't a fairy tale where we live happily ever after. It's a real story where we choose to be happy every day, despite the problems, despite the imperfections, despite everything." "Do you regret anything?" Emily thought carefully before answering. "I regret the pain. I regret the time we spent angry instead of talking. I regret the lost opportunities to be braver. But I don't regret the path itself, because this path brought us here, to this moment, to this version of ourselves that can love without fear and forgive without resentment." Michael stopped in the middle of the field and hugged her, feeling the deep gratitude of someone who knows they have received more love than they deserved. "I love you, Emily Harrison. I love you, Michael Alexander Harrison." And as the sun set over the hills of Tennessee, painting everything in gold, Emily and Michael knew they had achieved something extraordinary. They had transformed a story of pain into a story of hope, a story of abandonment into a story of reunion, a story of broken love into a story of love repaired and strengthened. Their story had not ended. They would continue to grow old together, facing new challenges, celebrating new joys, learning new ways to love each other. But they had established something solid, a foundation of mutual respect, honest communication, and daily commitment that could withstand any storm. And somewhere in Nashville, as Sarah rocked her own baby to sleep, she would whisper the story of her grandparents, a story about the dignity of forgiving without forgetting, about the courage to love after pain, and about the beauty of second chances. earned through effort and maintained with care. It was a story that Alexander would grow up hearing, a story that would teach him that true love isn't perfect, but it is possible, a story that would pass on to the next generations as a testament that it is never too late to rewrite your ending and that brave hearts always find their way back home.